Hey, welcome. What I'd like for you to do real fast is make sure you say hi to the folks at your table. Hello. Introduce yourself. Hey, I got a nice... Oh, you got a chair.
I got your... Yeah, this one's sliding down.
I know, there's some...
I was like, okay, I'll just grab it.
A lot of them are broken. I noticed. Well, look at this. Why don't we set it up where you actually get a real desk then?
Oh, it's whatever you want me to do.
Well, I mean, it just feels like you'll be more comfortable. Oh.
Just had a broken desk, but you'll...
Yep.
Oh, you're trying to save all the funding, aren't you? This will be my...
All right, if you could bring it together. All right, so we're going to try to get a lot of opportunities to talk, though I will admit the first part of this session we cover a lot of information. Okay, so bear with me when we do that. So I'll try to make sure that we cover what you need us to cover, though, or what you need me to cover. My name is Levi, and this is about the fourth time I've made a trip around the state, doing this kind of thing, and it is also maybe the fourth time that I've said, "Hey, we have new standards," right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So let me just be clear about how I feel about this. I'm kind of tired of having new standards. I'm kind of tired of implementing new standards. Is that a familiar feeling? So I'm going to try to make sure, right, that you have the right information, that we are able to work together, and that we get excited about it. Because for the sake of my future career and my marriage, I can't do another set of standards again. Okay. We just got to make this guy work. Okay. We got to make this thing happen because I think we're all a little bit jaded, at this point in the process. So we'll talk a little bit about the standards, absolutely. But and I actually do think that the standards represent a really important change in a lot of ways, and I'll try to elaborate on that. We'll see, especially in middle school, you're going to see a lot of things that are very, very different. Middle school is profoundly different at this point. But also the intention of the standards is something that we've really taken a lot of time with, and we think that we actually have a new vision for the standards that is also a new addition and something that we will be proud of in the future. So let me give you a few little bits of logistics first. I would love for you to write down a web address. It's a very short one right up here. It is case sensitive after this. So if you go to a website, goo.gl /62 capital Z lowercase tki. That is a capital Z lowercase tki. That address right there will take you to this presentation, which anytime I update the presentation, you'll get the newest version of it. Plus, I have a lot of links inside of it that will take you to other things that you probably will want. For example, all of the handouts and more for today's session is available by simply clicking on that link once you're there. So you don't have to actually write that other link down if you don't want to. You just go to the presentation and click on that link. You can write it down if you want, though, of course. So, for example, you guys have a transcript, which I'm going to ask you not to read yet. Did you see the? It's surprisingly tempting to read, so don't. If you mark all over that by the end of this day, which is the intent, and you want a clean copy because you want to look at it for some reason or another, it's always going to be in this folder that's available right there. Okay? Yeah, come on in. We've got 2 spots for you over here. So, okay, so throughout the session, there are a few links that you'll see. Another good thing, Polly, are you reading that? Were you reading the transcript?
There was 2 sides.
There are 2 sides. Okay. You guys, math teachers love doing math, and they love working ahead, okay? So I have to calm people down. So now I know. I'll be watching for you. So, all right. So let me tell you a little bit about what you just kind of have stumbled into. This is the Math Task Force, which is a weird name, I think, for a session at a conference like this. The reason why it's called the Math Task Force is because you are now officially members, lifetime members, non-revocable membership of the Math Task Force, which basically means we're trying something really, really new and interesting. Robin Glensman and I, Robin's our elementary math director, we have a little plan that we think is going to be pretty cool. And here's what it's going to look like. For 1 week, each 9 weeks, we're going to ask you to join us and join teachers across the state in trying out something. It'll just be a week where every single teacher in the state collectively tries to improve their practice purposefully, which means that we'll together be focusing on the same effective teaching practices. And together, across the grade levels, we'll focus on the same lesson and talk about what about that lesson worked and didn't work with our students, and how do we get better implementing that lesson. And so for the first semester, we'll actually give you the lessons.
Would you have like each grade level?
Yeah, every grade level, pre-K through Algebra 2. So no matter what you teach, you can do one of them. You just give us a week of your time, and you'll be able to do that task in your class and see how it goes. It's actually a pretty small risk, in my opinion. And I'll try to make that point, more obviously. That little machine is... Did you see it? It was filming over there for a second. Okay. But during that week, in the first semester, it's going to be all about us providing kind of scaffolding for you so that it's not really too cumbersome. In the spring, that's when we really ramp up. We've got 25,000 math teachers in the state of Oklahoma. Just contemplate that for a second. 20,000 of them are elementary teachers teaching some form of mathematics, but still, they're math teachers. 5,000 of us are secondary math teachers. So what if 10% of all 25,000 teachers in the spring contributed one great task? That's not crazy, is it? 10%? That's nothing. Right? And then all of a sudden, we could, in the spring, in 1 week, produce hundreds. Right, somebody do the math for me. 2,500 individual examples of what that looks like in the classroom. That's crazy, isn't it? And so all we're looking for really is the future vision is what would happen if collectively, 1 week at a time, across the next couple of years, we as a state created amazing tasks that every teacher could use, with tons of resources and support around those tasks so that it was clear what it could look like in your classroom, and that together we were growing patiently and with intention in improving our practice. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it, because I actually think, as I've only been in this job for 4 years, and in the 4 years what I've seen is that it is really hard to try to get people on the same page. Do you feel like you're on an island every once in a while? Like you're just on, Was it an always? Yeah, and you know what? That's not the way it should work. We are a community of teachers. We have almost 4,000 people in the same Facebook group, y'all. If we can do that, surely we can get on the same track forward and figure out a few things about teaching, right? And do it together so it's not overwhelming for us. So my point is, I think Robin and I, we think there's a really cool vision. And today we're going to run through a version of it. It's a little bit of a scaffold into it, right? We'll just kind of play with what's it look like to use a case study to analyze practice. What's it look like to really look at a lesson and make sense of that lesson and what it's going to look like in the classroom. So that's the vision. So let me tell you a little bit more about me just in case. You can always get a hold of me on Facebook and Twitter. If you want to, you can call my office. I won't be there. Okay? You can also email me. I might not answer the email. Not because I don't love you, because I do. But I honestly, it's overwhelming. And if you have a question, 9 times out of 10, if you can text that to me or you can put it on Facebook or Twitter, I can get back to you much easier. Okay? So the reason why I prefer Twitter or Facebook is because I get to answer your question, and then thousands of other teachers benefit from it. You can imagine. But not everybody's on Facebook, so you probably have a phone. You can call or text me. My cell phone number is small, but it's area code 405-620-2080. So, from the very first time I took this job, the very first day, that was a big issue of mine. Is I really wanted to make sure that teachers knew that they were supported. If you have a question, I wanted it answered ASAP. Okay? I don't want you to feel like you don't have the right information at your fingertips. So, hopefully you find that useful. Please join the Facebook group if you're on Facebook. Search #OKMath. Anybody in there? A lot of you are in there. Anybody want to give a reason why it's amazing? Ellen?
Great resources.
Just tons of resources. Other reasons?
Shared
Oh.
with all my peers, and they're like, where did you get that? And I said,
Yeah. Yeah, remarkable resources. People in there who are always pushing me forward. They're introducing new ideas, reading new books. There's a book study happening right now where they're reading Joel Bowler's new book, Mathematical Mindsets. I mean, it is a really cool space. Any other reasons? Yeah. Immediate. Like, significant, right? You can get answers, tons of answers, right? All right, so join it. If you're on Facebook, join it. You'll love it. So let me tell you one thing. The agenda today I've kind of described briefly. If you're on this presentation, on the agenda you can click this link and it will take you to something else that we're doing that's kind of cool. We found that a bunch of teachers wanted to share curriculum maps. Did you hear about all that? If you're on Facebook, you probably saw it and you've seen some of the drama with it. Yeah, they keep getting lost. People keep accidentally deleting my folders.
They're like, I'm going to work on it. I'm like, okay, we're gone again.
Yeah, I've been like dying. Okay, but it's cool. There are a lot of folks again who feel like they're on an island, who maybe you don't have a support structure to help design a curriculum map, right? So we have people who are sharing them. So if you're on Facebook, it's pretty easy to find. It's been a conversation that's been happening, over and over again. So just search. If you're on there, search grade-specific folders. Or if you're on this presentation, you can just click that link and take you directly there. Okay. And honestly, what I'm trying to figure out is how to convince people just not to delete, remove, or rename things on on Google. So help me out with that. Okay, help me out with that because it's been rough on me. Because it's a collaborative document space, right? We're doing a lot of things to help, but I want to make sure that you understand a little bit about what's happening in the past so that we can better understand what's going on in the future. And I don't want to go too far back, but you probably remember when we repealed Common Core. That was a big deal because we spent a lot of time getting ready for Common Core. So getting rid of it was, yes, I'm seeing some, yeah, it's like an understatement, right? We had been convinced that that's where we were going. And even though it wasn't this kind of, not everybody was necessarily on board, but for a lot of reasons, it got ditched. And then we were left in a really quick timeline to go back to pass and then create new standards. So approximately an entire year went by from the time that it was repealed to the time that we were able to start the standards writing process. Because we had to have, because there was a whole law about it. It wasn't just do it. There was a whole law that defined so many things that we had to do. So we had to have a steering committee, and that steering committee created a team of 20 who was the writing team. And that team of 20 met for the first time on May 5th and started working on these standards. And I'll tell you a little bit about the conversations that we had. But this is a good group of folks. All classroom educators or former educators. If they were former, they were college professors at this point. A good team, and that team had a priority throughout the entire thing to make sure that folks got to have input. So it wasn't a we're going to do all the work and then we're going to have a final copy. It went out for public comment multiple times, and we received tons of comments. And I think Superintendent mentioned that there were something like 2,000 pieces of feedback or comments that came back. But if you think about each one of those people who submitted comments, they were commenting on multiple things, right? So it ended up being like, I don't remember what the number was, like 15,000 or something crazy individual comments that our poor folks had to read at least, half of them, right? No, really, they read all of them. They read all of them and they dealt with them all because we had to understand: is this a valid comment or a suggestion? So, remarkably, between May and really November, the major work of the standards was done. And we had a version 4, I think, was published, or version 3, I don't remember which it was published in November. And then over Christmas break, we took the feedback and we finalized it. And by January 21st or so, the OSDE board approved the standards, and the higher regents certified them as college and career ready. Which maybe, okay, we've been here. We've had standards in the past, but for me, who's been like living and breathing these standards for those last 2 years, it was a big day. I was really, really excited for everybody. We had a little bit of turmoil starting on February 1st. We took them to the legislature, and that's when things got interesting. The legislature had to pass them by passing a rule in with a resolution in the House and a resolution in the Senate. And those resolutions have to be the same for it to be a joint House resolution. And that's what the law required. Well, they couldn't agree. The House approved them and had some conditions. The Senate approved them and had some conditions, but the conditions weren't the same. And so because they never agreed, the 30-day time limit passed. And the law said if you don't agree by 30 days, they just default, automatically pass. So we ended up with new standards, which is great news because I was freaking out about it. And the turmoil was interesting because we really, thanks to a lot of teachers, we had support letters that came in. Went to the Senate. Some teacher letters were read on the Senate Education Committee hearing about the standards. We have a new organization, which I'm going to promote to you all, called the Oklahoma Math Alliance. And the Math Alliance is an umbrella organization of all of the existing math organizations in the state. And there's a particular part of the state that is very absent right now. Donna is a good example of somebody who's engaged in OCTM, for example, the Oklahoma Council of Teachers of Mathematics. We actually don't have a whole lot of folks who are involved in OCTM from this region. And I don't know why. It's dirt cheap. They have a nice conference. And it's a really nice way to get engaged. But importantly, we also don't really have a Southwestern consortium, a math consortium. And these are not things that are run by me or the state of Oklahoma. They're just groups of teachers who come together regularly to talk about math education and make sure that they're informed and communicating with each other. So we have one for Northeastern Oklahoma, Southeastern Oklahoma, and Central Oklahoma. Not one for Southwestern. And the reason why I'm saying that is because through OCTM is a member of the Alliance. All the consortia are members of the Alliance. All these organizations, name a math organization, which you probably would know, there are 15 of them in the state right now. All 15 math organizations are members of this umbrella organization. And it's a pretty cool thing because they wrote a support letter for the standards and it was read by the Senate Education Chair in the Senate Committee. And that really goes to show that folks, teachers especially who maybe haven't felt like they are listened to or they have a lot of power, in that space they really do. It's a collective power that's really important. So, please join OCTM or think about what it would look like to work with teachers in this region so that you guys have a community of teachers who are working together to improve. Because I think, actually, I love the consortia. I think it's a really cool process. And it really is what you want to make it. Okay, lastly, we got the standards approved. Oh, no, that's why I was starting to tell that story because when the standards, the turmoil was happening, like Glenn Beck went after us. Do you remember that? All sorts of things were happening. Huh? They called us a weasel. So for a while, that was my nickname, head math weasel. All of this stuff was happening, and you know what happened is math teachers from these organizations went to bat for the standards. And I just can't say enough about how important that is that we had people who believed in the standards who were fighting for them. So all of that's really cool. And on this side of things, what you're holding in your hands with the standards, it represents really some of the most important work we've done in a long time in the state for math teachers. This is built by Oklahoman math teachers, not because it's a nice tagline, but it's because we really worked our tails off to do it. And we were in those rooms making it happen. So we'll talk some more about that, but let me tell you about what we're doing to help make these standards make sense. Importantly, you got the at-a-glance documents. Have you already seen the at-a-glance documents? A little bit? Okay. The at-a-glance documents are a must-have. You can download them right now at the State Department of Ed website for mathematics. Okay? You got to have them for a couple reasons. One, the first two columns on the at-a-glance on the left, they're going to help you see what's new and different for your grade level compared to past. That's nice, right? But the third column is the column that matters. It's the critical gaps. So imagine with me if teachers in the state didn't teach the critical gaps. Students in Oklahoma would never learn the commutative property. They would not learn the distributive property. They would not learn about classifying three-dimensional objects. They would not learn about volume of rectangular prisms. There's a whole group of kids who, if we don't teach the critical gaps this next year, will lose out. So next year, there's something incredibly important. We have a transition coming, and it's always going to be hard. I'm going to try to make it easier. But this year, if we don't take the critical gaps and do them on top of the transition, it will be even harder. So the kiddos that you got next year, you are responsible for making sure you get the critical gaps taught to them. Feels heavy. I'm making it a big deal, and all I need you to do is just pinky swear that you'll do it. Okay, so it's fine. You don't have to pinky swear me. It can be yourself or just anybody out loud. Will you just say it? I will teach the critical gaps. You guys are good people. Thank you. Now, the last thing I need you to do is make sure that if there is some teacher around you that happens to teach math, you will make sure that they teach the critical gaps. If you have a teacher around you who is below you, you better be making this a big deal because it will come back to bite you. You with me?
You didn't print off the at-a-glance, right?
I didn't print them off. I did not print them off. There's a place, actually there's an 11 o'clock session with that's here today about assessment and accountability where they actually are handing them out. But I did not print them off just because I want you to go down. I just want you to download them and print them off for everybody around you. But okay, you're going to do them? Guess what happens if you don't? Kids are going to miss out. Okay? So the new standards are only as good as the transition. We got to get this transition and we got to make it happen, and this is the part of it that matters the most right now. Everybody's with me? Where do you go to download the at-a-glance documents? State Department of Ed website, math page.
Yeah, math page, because if you go to the State Department page, it says this stuff is being worked on. There's nothing else.
All right, Sandra, you're going to have to help me out with that, but let me just show you where to go for it. If you go to sde.ok.gov, what I do is whenever I go to the website, because I hate navigating websites that are confusing, at the end of it, I just type in mathematics. Right? And then you're at the math page. And from the math page, you can download our blueprints, the calculator policies, the at-a-glance documents. From the at-a-glance documents, you can download the crosswalks if you want to see direct comparisons to pass. It's all there on the math page. State Department /mathematics. Also, we have some interesting resources. Like, I like crosswalks enough, but I don't care about having them completed. If you think crosswalks are interesting and you want them, what I'd recommend is actually doing the crosswalk analysis yourself. I know it's more work, and that sounds like a bad idea, but if you actually want to learn from it, that's what you got to do. And so that's what we did is we made blank crosswalk documents, which is just set up so you can actually analyze the standards. And I know that sounds like a small thing, but if you're asking me, don't print off the completed ones. Do it yourself, and you'll actually really, really have an understanding of them. So, let's see. I want to tell you more about the resources we're creating to make sure the standards implementation works for you. So the other thing that I'm so excited about, you already downloaded it. It's a nice document, right? You don't have to brag about it out loud. So here's the other thing that we're doing that I think you guys are going to love. We hired 36 math teachers in the state of Oklahoma, 3 for each grade, to create a resource called the Math Frameworks. Next week, we're going to have our first draft of it available for you. I know, right? So here's what it's going to have. For each and every grade, you're going to get an introduction to the grade. So you get to see what does it mean for a kid to be in a 6th grade class in Oklahoma. So that's over here on the left. Then there are 4 components on the right. You're gonna get a document or some kind of description of how the math actions and processes look at your grade level. And we'll talk more about the maps in a second. Math actions and processes, we call them maps. You're going to get a learning progression, which is essentially our version of a curriculum map. It is not a curriculum map that's more of a checklist kind of thing. It's not like that. It's very different. If you're on Facebook, you've seen some of the work. They're bundling the standards together, and it is really interesting. And I've heard some really good feedback about it. It pushes people a little bit beyond what they've done, though. So if you look at it and you go, ooh, I don't know, that's a little too different for me. That's why we have the grade-specific folder, so you can find other curriculum maps that might work for you. So we're not saying you got to do it this way, right? If you find somebody else's that you like, you can. We're just trying to push us forward into a little bit of a new space with curriculum maps. For each one of the units in the curriculum map, we're going to connect it to the storyline of the learning experience, have essential questions, have ideas about the assessment and instructional tasks that could go inside of that unit. And then for every standard in your grade level, and in fact for every objective, we're going to provide you 5 things, which I am really happy about. You're going to get a nutshell statement, which tells you what that objective is in layman's terms. Then what you're going to get is a list of key understandings, like what does it actually mean to know conceptually this standard, and key misconceptions. What are students actually dealing with that they struggle with here? These are not the same as mistakes, right? These are actually misunderstandings. Then you're going to get teacher actions and student actions. And teacher actions will give you some insight about what the teacher is doing to support the student learning this, and what the student is doing as they're exploring this concept for every single objective. So if you don't know what an objective is, grab your standards again. It may seem obvious, but I want to make sure you guys see it. The structure of the standards has 3 main grain sizes. Of course, within each grade, you have strands. And in the ones that you guys have, those strands are into the dark, maroonish brown, black color. It says number operations. That in every grade level in middle school, you got 4 of those. Number and operations, algebraic reasoning and algebra, geometry, measurement, and data and probability. You'll see them as you're scrolling. Not scrolling. This is real life. As you're turning your pages, you'll see the strands. Underneath each strand, we usually have anywhere from 1 to 5 standards. The standards are in bold. And then within each standard, you have usually 1 to 8, I think, objectives. Those are the ones that are not in bold. It's important to know that this structure exists for a lot of reasons, because especially if you're a middle school teacher and you just counted the number of objectives, you'd have to make sure that somebody was around you to wake you up after you passed out, okay? Because we did something a lot different with the standards. They're not organized the way they have been in the past. We don't have as many hidden standards. You guys know what I mean by that? Where you look at a standard, you teach it, but it actually took you 4 or 5 weeks to teach just that thing. That's not what we're talking about. We wanted standards that were equitable for all. And what does it mean to build equity? It means that if a teacher looks at this, they're going to have some sense of the learner experience, no matter what textbook they have or no matter what background. It's a learning progression that makes sense. Also, we design them a little bit different because we don't want you to focus solely on the objectives. This is a real tricky thing. These standards are designed to be bundled. Right? They tell a story better together than they do apart. Okay? So the way that the assessments will be designed, and when you look at the blueprints, we don't tell you how many assessment items there will be for each objective. We only tell you for the assessment, for the standard level. Have you guys seen that already? Did it scare you? Yes. So let me I'll do 7th grade here. All right, so do you see how it's set up here? So we'll tell you like a number kind of only at the standard level, but otherwise you're getting like these large kind of categories. Right? So we only report at this level. Well, wait a second. Yeah, we're only reporting at this level right here, this middle level. I'm pretty sure that's the case. I'll double check with our assessment office, because actually I haven't seen it in the cleaned up view. I only saw it in the spreadsheet view, and it was more obvious there for me. The interesting thing is that you'll see that clearly we don't have objectives in here. And that allows for us to be really careful and thoughtful about the way we design the items, where before you design an item, and we all said it only can be about that standard, right? One item, one standard. But we all knew there were a lot of reasons why you could mess up on a task. Assessment task. And it could be any number of other things, right? So this actually gives us a chance to say, well, these things are actually really well connected, and now we can explore their connections better together. And what we're going to be able to tell you in the end is to what extent the student knows the standard, not just that little objective. If you want to know the little objectives, that's instructional assessment, right? For you to be really thoughtful about that. And you can imagine an instructional assessment process that allows you a little more insight. But from the state level, we don't need that detailed stuff. We just want to say, like, broadly, is the student understanding that standard? So I think it's a little scary, but it's also a good time for it. TLE has gone away. The VAM has. Yeah, I know, right? The value-added measures has gone away. So a lot of the pressures that you felt in the past about assessment, like for a moment, that's gone, right? EOIs have gone away. I think some of you in here teach high school as well. EOIs have gone away. So kids don't have to pass these classes to graduate any longer. And I really think, with all that in mind, together what we should be focusing on is making sure that we are the teachers we want to be, not the teachers who make sure that our kids are just passing these tests. And there's a difference there, I think. I think you probably agree. So as we're exploring all of these things, I'll probably come back to this occasionally. But I think there's a big difference in what it means to teach for performance versus teaching for learning. And I think because of the system of accountability and assessment that we've had in the past, we've had to be really oriented toward performing. And that's caused us to do some things that I think if we were really to be reflective, we would actually probably disagree with. We aren't that happy that we were having to do that. Or at least that's what I've been hearing, right? So this is interesting. I want to make sure that you guys see that so that and we'll be exploring. We don't expect to have blueprints, item specifications out until late September. So keep that in mind. But what that means is, for a little while, like, we actually just get to just do it. And I know it can cause stress, but it also, what I would say is, like, let's just let it be an opportunity more than a hurdle, right? Sure.
On the gaps?
Yes.
The gaps, so the gaps for 8th grade pre-algebra are not on the 8th grade test, but there's things that they need to learn because otherwise they wouldn't get them, correct?
Yes, so the gaps that are listed in a grade level
are necessary, but they're not testable. Is that correct?
Not tested in that grade level.
In that grade level.
Yeah, so they're necessary but not tested in that grade level. They're all things that have moved down in the new standards. But the reason why it's so important to teach is because so often these are things that are predecessors to the things in your grades.
So you would suggest doing the critical gaps first? Right?
Yes, I would analyze the critical gaps and decide in which ways they bundle together with an existing standard in your grade level, right? Because if you're gonna be teaching, so example, 6th grade, you're going to be dealing with, like, you have nets here. That if those kids have an experience with nets, they're going to be more likely to be able to handle surface area and things like that, right? So it's really important. Nets are? Surface area is, yes. Now I've heard a lot about that, but that's why it's so important to bring with nets first, early. I don't think surface area will be as complex as it has been. So like we've always waited so late to teach nets and surface area. So now actually we have a nice transition between the way that students are dealing with three-dimensional figures and nets in elementary to surface area. So it wasn't just kind of moved around without that in the mind. So we have a lot of interesting things coming, y'all. This is what I can't tell you how excited I am about this. I had a teacher send me their draft just the other night. And I read through it and I just thought, this is it. Like, this would help me so much. Just go after what I want to do and have clarity about some of the items that are in the assessment in the standards. So I hope that you guys like it. Like I said, we'll have a draft out next week, and also by the end of September we'll have pretty much the final version out. So let's make sure we wrap around assessment so we can start doing some math and talk more about the standards. So. While high school assessments have gone away, 3 through 8 math assessments have stayed the same, right? You'll still have 3 through 8 math assessments. Because the high school assessments have gone away, if a student is in an advanced math course in middle school, they can no longer take a high school course assessment to replace that, right? So Algebra 1 in 8th grade, for example, previously the federal government was okay with us saying, instead of taking the 8th grade course, they'll take the Algebra 1 course test, right? We got that waiver 2 years ago, or 3, I don't remember which. Now there's no test to replace it, so 8th graders, no matter what course they're in, will take an 8th grade test.
So if they have both algebra and geometry, because I have several 7th graders who take algebra and then 8th graders taking geometry, why can't they take the 10th grade test if they have both?
Good question, because they're not in 10th grade. I know. I'm with you.
Because
So,
it's standardized for that age level of student, right?
Yes,
That's
right.
what you're trying to do.
we're just
Trying to see what a 10th grader knows.
we're just saying, what do 8th graders in general know? It's not so much about, it's different than the way that we've treated assessments in the past, right? It's different. It's meant to be more of a measuring stick and an understanding of how old are kids in 8th grade? 13?
Yeah.
What are 13-year-olds in the state able to do mathematically? And better understand the range. And the test, if we remember that the test actually is now serving that role more than it is serving a did you pass or fail this class or will you not graduate, if it's really a measuring stick for the state and helping us understand the scope, then one, we don't have to teach the test as much. So we can kind of calm down on that, right? And all the pressure that's there, the pressure cooker. And two, we actually can find out if our kids are really learning the middle school concepts. And this is what I've been dealing with. So I at first was opposed. So let me be clear. At first, and you guys probably know, like I was fighting hard for the double testing waiver. Like that was a big thing when I came in, because I taught 8th grade geometry. It was a big thing that I was working on. We got the double testing waiver, and so whenever I just found out that this all was happening, I was unhappy. So I started looking, because that's how I am, I started looking at like what are people saying about this work nationally. And NCTM has actually come out and said, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, they've actually said for state level assessments, you should assess kids at their grade level, not the course that they're in. And at first I disagreed with them. But I'm slowly becoming aware of what they're trying to do. What they're saying is too many kids are passing Algebra 1 and still can't pass 7th grade. Too many kids are making it to calculus and still don't know middle school concepts. And we know that kids who make it to calculus, like you've all heard statistics about, calculus is like the end-all be-all, right? But it turns out that it's not. Like if those kids don't have middle school concepts, if they've been skipping grades or low performing in middle school, they are not going to succeed. So with that in mind, it makes me feel a little bit better. Maybe we could assess 8th graders for being 8th graders, and if we find out that a bunch of kids are in geometry in 8th grade and they're still not passing the 8th grade test, we can be more critical of who we're putting into these advanced courses. You know what I mean? So, by the way, also NCTM and some really good research coming out of San Francisco is starting to say, maybe we should just stop doing so many advanced courses. So there's a lot of what's that? Yes. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when I saw the testing schedules for the grade level, is it 3 through 8 and then 10th grade level
Yeah.
they're getting tested?
You got it. That's it.
Okay, that's what I understood. I thought, maybe I'm missing this.
No.
10th grade here.
That's the only test that they're taking in high school, are the math and the biology test in 10th grade?
They'll take all 4 areas.
In 10th grade?
Yep.
And then they'll take the ACT as a junior. And
Yep.
that's it, and that's all they're
Well, we don't know it'll be the ACT, but it'll be a college.
college.
Okay. And the objectives was kind of listed there, more like algebra.
Yeah, for the 10th grade assessment, it is 90% Algebra 1 and 10% geometry.
Yes, that's how I
Now, let me just tell you what I don't want you to go do. I don't want you to put geometry in 9th grade because of it. So a lot of people are looking at that blueprint and they're saying, well, shoot, if the kids have 90% Algebra 1 on the state assessment in 10th grade, let's make sure that the 10th grade class is Algebra 1. And they're moving geometry up. That is not our recommendation. It is a strong strong recommendation to leave it be. Leave it be. Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 is the way the standards were designed. I've heard some people that do Algebra 1, Algebra 2 geometry sequences. I'm actually still really skeptical of that because Algebra 2 is hard. And Algebra 1 is hard enough, and geometry gives, if done well, geometry builds so many of those Algebra 1 concepts. So I'm not convinced on that, but some people are doing it. I am convinced that geometry first is not the right way to do it. So be careful about that. Because of the algebra concepts, yes. So how would you handle so many of the things in geometry if you weren't ready? There are a lot of things that I think you wouldn't be ready for. But also because I don't think the blueprints are going to stay the same in high school. I think that in the next couple of years we will shift to more of a 50-50 algebra geometry blueprint for the high school test. The reason why I believe that is because I'm working on it. The reason why I'm working on it is because I want that test to be predictive of what's happening on the ACT, and the ACT has an awful lot of geometry on it.
So how many kids who haven't had geometry?
We don't have very many kids that haven't had geometry in the state, though. Out of around 60,000 kids who are taking Algebra 1, something like 6,000 kids aren't taking geometry by the end of 10th grade across the state. So which is good news because it's not a graduation test. So we have something like 20,000 kids who are in advanced coursework, meaning that they're actually making it past geometry before 10th grade. Or maybe that's 10,000. Let me see. I guess it would be 10,000 each year. There's a total, across the grade levels, we have 20,000 who are in advanced courses. So each year, about 10,000 advanced and 6,000 below. So the variation there, I think, is still, we should remember, the test is about what's generally happening for 10th graders, not can this kid graduate because of this test, or is this teacher doing a good job because of this test. So that's why I'm trying to point back to. There's a mindset shift. This is not meant to serve the same purposes. Yeah.
So I have one more question.
You only get one more, okay?
I might have more. So they were on ACE program, right?
Yes.
The high school students were. If they are junior this year, that's all nullified.
It's gone.
Thanks for affecting them at all.
Thanks for playing.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Waste of money. How much money do you spend on testing?
Yeah.
That-
we'll just all agree with you. Yeah, you're right.
I'm glad for them though.
I know. So I think we know it's going to be better for a lot of kids.
Yes.
But it's still frustrating because you're kind of like, well, yeah, but a lot of kids have been through a lot of stuff
Yes.
getting to this point. And wouldn't it be nice if we could just say congratulations?
Get some reward for it.
Yeah. So, okay, last thing I want to hit before we cover everything with the standards, calculator policy, real fast. I've been tweeting about it, sharing about it. 6-function calculator in 6th and 7th grade, which is a 4-function calculator plus 2 functions, square root and percents. Why are we on the state assessment? On the state assessment?
Because it's about the concepts they want to know if they're
I know that's your response all the time, but their concepts not built till 7th grade.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, so we'll explore some of it. So what we're trying to figure out, there are some, yes. Now, instructionally, are we saying kids should be holding onto a calculator all the time? No. No. We're not saying instructionally. What we're saying is on a state assessment, one where we want to know what kids can and cannot do. On some of the items, we'd like for them not to get the wrong answer because they screwed up in a 3rd grade math concept. I want to know as well as I can, did they get the 6th grade math concept? Right? And if there's a way to get the wrong answer because you messed up on arithmetic from earlier grades, then that's what's called a confounding factor. Right? So a calculator policy that's a little bit more broad at a state level gets us some flexibility because what we can't do on a state assessment is look at student work. Teachers, when you assess, you give half credit on things, partial credit, full credit sometimes because you got a kid who could do the math, but they made a silly error. We can't do that on a state assessment. That kid will miss that item, even if we know they know the math. So, I don't think on a classroom level, 100% of the time you got to have the calculator policy. But I do think as a statewide policy for assessments, it's useful. Now, in Drew, I think the critical piece here is I believe the recommendation has been that there should be a calculator on and a calculator off portion of the 6th and 7th grade test.
Good.
So some of them would be off. Clearly, it's hard to know if a kid can add and subtract integers or multiply rational numbers if they got a calculator in their hand, right? Or deal with percents or a lot of things. So there's a balance. There are some things here that are very much arithmetic based, right? In our standards. Yes. Yep. Sorry. Oh, Sandra.
How is that going to happen if you've got a physical calculator? So is it going to be like a
2 sessions.
A session, 2 sessions, and you can use it with one but not with the other?
Exactly right. It'll be 2 sessions, just like just like high school assessments have been done.
So it's going to be an online test in 6th grade.
Yeah. Still.
And then
That's
why not
that's
put an
state law.
online calculator on there?
It is
Oh yeah. That would still be there.
A lot of kids have to have like
a physical in their hand.
Yep.
IEPs.
Yeah, so if 6th and 7th should use a 4 function plus 2, the square root and percents. That's why I'm calling it 6 function. Go with me on that, okay? I'm trying to save some time. Now I have to explain it still. 6 function calculator. In 8th grade, pre-algebra, they can use a scientific calculator. We think all the way through. We haven't really actually had much concern about that. If you look at the 8th grade standards, not a lot of them are they're not arithmetic heavy. And then in high school, in the 10th grade test, a graphing calculator. Yes, they could use both. They can use anything at or below the level, right? So, and even on the test, if they're like the 10th grade test, they'll have access to a graphing calculator, but also a scientific and a 4 function. Yeah, they could use whatever they felt comfortable with. A lot of kids don't use graphing calculators a lot. So if they were, most of the stuff that you need it for is really scientific anyways. You could just do it there.
Which graphing calculator would you recommend? I recently went to the pre-AP and there was a whole, some people were going for the 84s, some were going for Imperium, and
Yeah, like the Inspires and whatnot. So what we have available on the screen is almost always a TI-84.
84, which is what they're promoting, so it's probably a good idea to purchase those, because if they forget their calculator, they have to use the one on the screen. That's what they're going to see on the test.
If it were me and I had like my own little math department, we would probably be looking at TI because it's on the test. But I tell you what I definitely would be doing is using Desmos more than anything. Desmos is a free online graphing calculator. It works on every single device that there is. Can you download apps right now?
I've already got it on my.
You already have Desmos?
Oh, yeah, he's a math person.
Isn't it awesome? I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I got to hang out at the Desmos headquarters this last year with Dan Meyer and Eli. Okay, so check this out. This is on a, what is this?
It's an iPad Pro.
Dang. Okay, so don't screw this up. So let me just say y equals m x plus b. So right up here, what it does is it asks me, do I want to add sliders for it? I can add sliders. And now it works. Pretty cool, right? And this is the most boring thing it does. It does millions and millions of other amazing functions. You just would not believe it. Plus, they have teacher.desmos.com, which is just filled with really cool activities. You can make card sorts there now. Oh, thanks, sir. By the way, this is Dan Meyer's clicker. You know Dan Meyer? We swapped clickers at a conference. He's my hero. All right, so so check out Desmos. I would do that because graphing calculators are important, like that a student knows the graphing calculator that's going to be on the test. But flexibility and understanding how graphing calculators work is really, that's actually there's mathematics understanding there that happens, right? Like, why do these functions happen and work? We don't want it to be an Easter egg hunt where they're looking for the things, so that's why we wanted to have the handheld experience. But mathematically, Desmos is really, really powerful. Everybody's going to download Desmos? No questions.
Clarification. That leads us to a allow the Algebra 1 students to use a graphing calculator classroom when they're learning Algebra 1, so they'll be prepared to take 10th grade level test in next year.
Yes.
Good point, Susan.
Good point. Not a question really, just a good point. So think it. We'll talk. We can just so you know, they can use graphing calculators on ACTs and SATs, right? Oklahoma is one of the few states that doesn't allow graphing calculators before junior year in Algebra 2. So the changeover is actually really important. We don't want our kids to be, handicapped without any graphing calculator experience. So it is important to start thinking about how we can leverage graphing technology in our classrooms, especially in our Algebra 1 and geometry classes. Yeah, I mean right now, that contract runs through our testing vendor. So we don't choose the graphing, the calculator contract. That goes through them. But until I hear otherwise, I'd assume yes. So all right, so let me tell you about dude, you're gonna fall in love with that stuff. You're literally not gonna hear another thing I say. Okay. So let me tell you about the new standards. You probably have seen the new standards a little bit. You have the new standards now. There's something that you should know about the new standards. The content in the standards is not what's most important, which is a weird thing, especially for math. Now, do I think we did a better job with it? Definitely. We handle proportional reasoning better. We handle fractions better. We handle exponents better. We teach linear thinking so much better than I think that we've ever done. I think this is a drastic improvement to the way that we've handled standards in the state of Oklahoma. But I still don't think they matter the most. In our old standards, we had 3 pages, 3 sections of the standards, one before each grade level or grade band, that were called the process standards. Do you remember them? So before elementary, before middle, and before high school, you could read about the 5 process standards that our standards focused on. And they were ignorable, almost entirely ignorable. Do you agree with that sentiment? Do you know of the ones I speak? Right? And they were ignorable because they weren't assessed, they weren't prioritized, they were hard for us to understand because we really hadn't taken a lot of time to understand them. I came out of my undergraduate education having focused on NCTM principles and standards, the 2000 document, which was big at the time. And everybody said the process standards matter, and I still left my undergraduate experience not really having a clue what it meant. And nobody asked me again as a teacher. My point in bringing that up is our new standards have process standards. We call them the math actions and process standards. They are an update of the great work that NCTM had in 2000 and really before in 1989, and a conglomeration of the work that the National Research Council did in 2001 in their report called Adding It Up, where they had the 5 mathematical proficiencies. So we combined the two. We said, there's actually some really, really valuable stuff when we look at these 2 ideas. Where do they connect? What do they mean for the mathematics learning experience? And when I told you earlier about how the team met on the first day on May 5th, what we debated about that day is about this. We said the thing that matters the most, we'll figure out the content, but the thing that matters the most is what are our kids learning? Not what math are they learning, but what are they learning to become? We think that in math they're going to learn to become problem solvers, citizens, people who can reason and argue and construct basic, arguments and understand how screwed up the world is, maybe. Okay, so, right? That we don't actually need a bunch of kids who can go out there and do the quadratic formula on the corner. Weird, right? We don't. Most math teachers don't teach math because they actually believe those students will be using that math later. I read a quote and I put it in. Am I wrong? Middle school teachers are probably a little more unique than others, but I read a quote the other day. It said the number one most likely use of algebra after school is in helping your child do their homework. So it's kind of, okay, I'm joking a little bit, but the point being, mathematics is not about so much the math as we kind of hope that it is, right? It's really about the kinds of learners we're trying to create in our classes. So we made a list, and at first it was a list, and then we argued about the order of the list, and then somebody had a really great idea about what if we put them into a circle so that we would show that they all matter, that we care that they all exist, and that they all are happening simultaneously. So here we have them. There are 7 of them. I don't want you to memorize them necessarily, but I wouldn't mind it. I want to talk about a couple of them in combination with each other. The first 2 that I want to point out are the conceptual understanding and procedural fluency ones in the top left. Right over here. I think that our books have fooled us. They have convinced us that what it means to be able to know and do math is to be able to know and do a procedure in math. That following a rule is the same as doing math. And I'm going to try to convince you maybe that's not all that there is.
Can I have your attention in the building, please? We have a gold Toyota parked in front of the big gym. We need that car moved immediately. There is a gold Toyota parked in front of our big gym. We need that car moved immediately. Thank you.
All right, good. So, procedures, mathematical procedures aren't all that there is. And Hung-Chi Wu, who's a math researcher out of UC Berkeley, says the same thing. He basically said, look, our textbooks are con artists. They tell us that what it means to learn math is to memorize the rule and then use that rule, and all of a sudden you've learned math. And it's like a late night TV show. Like in just 3 easy steps, you'll be able to find the roots of a quadratic equation. You don't know what the roots are. You don't know what a quadratic equation is, but you can do it. You know? And I think all of this is hard for me to understand, and again I'm going to say, because really we've been in a system. Together we've been in a system that was around assessment and accountability. Right? That caused us to focus so much on, can I teach the kid this, and can later in the week or in the month or the year, can they pass a test about that? And that has caused us to forget sometimes about the experience that they're having. So, does it matter? Absolutely. Procedural fluency matters, don't get me wrong. But it is not it. It is not all that exists. Conceptual understanding is essential. And in fact, that's the big point of the whole day, the second half of this conversation. The conceptual understanding has to precede the procedural fluency, or else I think the math is either non-existent or at least, at best maybe, hidden. So we'll look at that a little bit more. We have 3 that are really familiar to us. Developing problem-solving strategies. I don't want to talk about that a lot right now, but I'll tell you, it is different from solving problems. And in all ways, we should make sure that we are recognizing that. Again, guess who tells us that solving a lot of problems is the great way to help kids become problem solvers? Our textbooks. But depending on what textbook you're using. Donna's like, I don't use textbooks, so nobody's been telling me that. So problem solving isn't solving problems. Those 2 things are not the identical thing. We have to make sure that we think about what does it mean to be a problem solver. And I'll make some cases here in a moment. And importantly, that as we're solving, that we're going through this problem solving process, that we're able to reason, which involves understanding why and how things work and be able to communicate about those things to our peers. That we can construct arguments. And that was a big deal in Common Core, constructing arguments and critiquing arguments. That wasn't new. It was highlighted, but it wasn't new. So if you look at what we talk about when we talk about reasoning and communicating, you're going to see some ideas there that came straight out of NCTM. We need our kids to know that if you promote a way of solving a problem, I need to be able to look at that and say, that's working or not working for these reasons. And finally, my last 2. Has anybody in here ever told somebody that they're a math teacher? Yeah? And what did they say? That they're terrible at math? What did you say, Christy?
A lot of people say, I hated math when I was in high school.
I hated math. Is that what you all hear? Yeah. Yeah. When people tell me they hate math, I just tell them I hate them. And it works. Okay? Just kidding. Don't do that. That's bad advice. So actually the fear of mathematics is not genetic, but it is contagious. That's important to keep in mind. Parents and communities pass along a fear of math, not genetically, but as a type of a disease, really. A virus of sorts. You got it. So what would it be like to have students or a community who didn't hate math? What we're trying to figure out in these standards, and you'll see it a lot, and I don't know that I don't know that it will be totally evident in the standards, but it's going to be evident in the work that we try over the next few years. We want students to see it as purposeful and useful. And there's a really, really big part of this that I care about so much is that students don't see it as something that they just parrot or mimic, that they see it as something they create. And if you want to know what is happening in the world, and what is happening in places where teachers figured out how to get kids to like math and do math, the Third International Math and Science Study, TIMSS, did 20,000 hours of video analysis for classrooms all around the globe. And what they found is in the United States, 96% of the time, students were in the room. What they were doing is listening to how to solve a problem and then using that same strategy on problems that were similar. Does that sound familiar? Hasn't our textbook told us that's the way that we teach math? It sets it up for us. It says, define all the things, even if it's gobbledygook for kids. Define it first. Then show them how it plays out. Try to convince them it's interesting. And then have them do some that are similar. And that is by definition mimicking, right?
That was the first thing that I had a culture shock when I came to the States. My students said, tell me or tell us what to do, we will do it. Because I openly say, well, what do you think you have to do? I will put a project or
task, yeah.
And then I will ask them, what would you do? What should we do? And they're so frustrated. Now I became like the textbook. I tell them what to do, and they are doing really well following the steps. And I don't think that's really great.
Where are you from?
I'm from South Korea.
South Korea. Yeah. Not surprising. Yeah. So like Korea has a lot of stuff figured out actually.
We just leave things, situation or any circumstance, and just let them figure it out. And they will put all kinds of things to it, whether it makes sense or not to you. And you just kind of discover as you go through. But I could not do it in my classroom because they were so trained to what they were told to do and they followed it.
So we've all been conned, okay? So like our textbooks and all of our accountability and assessment system has convinced us that's the way, has convinced students that's the way. I am a firm believer that it takes 6 weeks to train students to do differently in a math class. That's what it did for me. It was 6 weeks before I could get kids to stop begging me for worksheets and lectures that they hated. You know what I mean? They're bored out of their mind already, but as soon as you make them work harder, all they want is to go back to being bored. But it's because they're poisoned by this. The system has poisoned them. It's poisoned us. And it's this bad cycle. So one of my favorite bloggers is Alex Overwick. He's out of Canada, but he talks about this too. He says, if you're going to make a change, you got to go all in. You can't do like incremental changes. Because if you say, I'm just going to try a little bit something different, guess what's going to happen for those kids? They're going to beg you to go back. They're going to beg. And he basically said, you got to commit to it. Give yourself 6 weeks. If you want to try something, even if it is small things, make it happen for 6 weeks and refuse to let those kids pull you back, because they will. They're crazy. That's the remarkable thing. I've been in classes where the kids won't, for the life of me, I can't get them to do the work that's assigned. But as soon as I give them harder work, all they want is to go back to not doing the work that they were not doing before. It's so interesting. But it's because they really like being passive. So, I love this one. I want students in Oklahoma to believe that math is useful. And I think what it takes is for us as teachers to reimagine math learning and math teaching. And say, what would it look like if my students left my class saying, man, I invented a lot of math last year. I created a lot of math last year, as opposed to I memorized a lot of math last year. And I want to make another point on this because why not just keep reiterating things? Have you ever had a student who came to you that you wondered, did they actually go to class last year, or did the teacher actually teach them last year? You've wondered it? Maybe about a person that's sitting at a table nearby. Why do we do that? Why does that happen? Yeah? Basic level, what'd you say, Donna? Etch-a-sketch brains. Ellen?
They don't see the relevance of the learning, so they'll forget it. But if they see the relevance, like we can link it to real life application, and
Yeah.
they think it's important, then they'll remember it.
This is like fundamental. It's just sketch brain is hilarious. That's funny. The thing that we know is that if you want kids to perform on a short term, teach them like the textbook teaches them. If you want to outperform the other teachers at your grade level on the end of the week or benchmark assessment, guess how? Teach them like the textbook tells you. If you want your kids to learn the mathematics and know it for a long amount of time, maybe over the year or perhaps beyond your year, teach for learning. And teaching for learning means that students are positioned as authors of their own mathematics. And it is a big difference. It is a huge difference. It's hard on you. It's hard on the student. But guess what? When they come to class next year, you're going to go, oh my gosh, you remembered something? It's a weird feeling. It's a weird feeling. So here, let me hit the last thing that's the most important about our new standards. Conjectures, modeling, and generalizing. I'm going to spend a lot of time exploring this with y'all. Not today, but in the future. Modeling, conjecturing, and generalizing. When we talk to mathematicians about what happens in the world of real mathematics, not school mathematics, they say this is what we do. I don't know where I was just pointing. This is what we do. We don't do worksheets. We don't memorize procedures. We're always trying to understand how the math models the world around us. We make conjectures about the patterns that we see in space and numbers, and we try to generalize it. And that may sound like real highfalutin language. Like, can you imagine a sixth grader being like, well, you know, I have a conjecture. No. But we can set it up, I promise we can set it up so that they can make guesses. And it works. So we'll do a task here in a second that demonstrates that. So let me leave you with one thought before we do this math problem. You guys matter the most. These standards, I think they're amazing standards. I love them. I love how we did exponents especially. Don't get me on that. I like our standards. But these standards won't make your students learn. Right? You are it. Because your student is poor or black or Hispanic or any underrepresented group who has traditionally not done well, these standards won't help them, but you can. Right? That's it. Because their parents were crappy at math, our standards can't help them, but you can. And that's what we find. Teaching is it. I'm going to spend a lot of time. Yeah, I know that you want to know about the standards. And I'm going to try to help make sure you know the standards with the frameworks project and all that stuff. But my job right now, from now on, what I'm going to try to do with y'all is do that 1 week in 9 weeks where we just say, what are we doing right now to make sure that we are the very best that we can be? Why not, right? If it's what matters the most, let's do it together. So let's do it. We have a new protocol that we're imagining. Robin and I are imagining. This list up here, you don't need to write down because it's going to change. We said, here's what we think could happen if we wanted a whole state to grow together. We find a good task that's worth doing. We do the task together. Then what we do is make sure that we investigate the effective teaching practices and the content and the maps of the standard. That's all before actually teaching it. Then we would teach the lesson to our students. We would gather student work, evidence of their work, by maybe taking a picture or two of what they're doing. And then what we do is we say, we'd analyze it, we talk about what we're going to do next in the lesson, what worked and what didn't, all these kinds of analysis issues. And then finally, we'd go back and we'd say, okay, good, we have a nice lesson study here in steps 4, 5, and 6, but we started by focusing on this effective teaching practice. And at the very end, before it's all said and done, we'll say, how did you do with that effective teaching practice? So in that, what I mean is, it's not so much about what content you were teaching. Maybe your goal was to pose purposeful questions. So it could have been anything, right? But we'll have you go back and say, what was I doing? What were the questions that I asked and did they work? And what could I do to improve that in any of my next lessons? So we'll really focus on that practice. So that's what we're imagining. And this is going to be set up in a Word document so that when you do it, you'll have all the information you need, but when you get student work, you'd be able to drop it right into that Word document and share it with people around the state. And you can do it anonymously. Okay, so we'll be sending out emails. We'll make sure you're in the loop on that. So here for the next 40 minutes, we're going to do the math lesson and explore the effective teaching practices. Okay? Feel good about it? So here it is. It's called the Candy Jar Task. If you go to this presentation and you want to see all the cool stuff connected to this, there's a little tiny link right there that you could click on if you were on this slide. So let's do this task. So there's a candy jar that contains 5 Jolly Ranchers shown in the squares and 13 Jawbreakers shown with hexagons. Suppose you had a new candy jar with the same ratio of Jolly Ranchers to Jawbreakers, but instead you have 100 Jolly Ranchers. How many Jawbreakers would you have? Explain how you know. Your math teachers, you probably knew that. What I expect is that you're going to do it a really specific way, and I like to call that way the teachery way. So I want you to knock that one out. But then I'd like for you to find 2 ways that a student might actually do this problem, and make sure you write it down. And before you look at anybody's work at your table, try to get those 3 ways done. The teachery way and 2 student ways. Hey, how you doing? Good. It's good to see you. You want to join a group? You want to do some math? All right. You doing all right? Okay. Okay. Did you already go to Robbins?
No.
Oh, man. Mine's really good. In a little bit, it's good. We have a good time. All right. The very end of my session is really fun. Like, I mean, with the math that we're exploring there is really cool. So if you go and come back, that's fine. Sorry. Did you already do it the teachery way? The teachery way? Did you already do it the teachery way? No, you're just starting this way.
Yeah, I just, I did 5, and then I did 5 more, and 5 more until I got to 100 Jolly Ranchers, then where would I be on the Jawbreakers?
So you got some counting to do?
Yep.
Or do you know the answer already?
No, I haven't done it.
Okay. All right. Melissa, how are you doing?
I worked it out, but then I'm making my kids say I like draw a picture.
Oh, cool. You don't have to do them all, but would you draw 1 or 2 just so you have a sense of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it that way.
You wouldn't? Yes, sure.
I think this was probably the easiest way to go, but I bet you do that anyway. You know what you do? I did a proportion.
Yeah, well,
But you get different.
makes 100.
Yeah, so that's one way to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly how a lot of kids are going to go through it.
Yeah. So what are some other ways?
I drew a picture.
I saw that. I like that. Well, no, that's good. That's good. I mean, we're dealing with, here we're dealing with, this is about a seventh grade standard. So, you can imagine a kid coming in with 6th grade experiences and drawing that. Definitely.
You've got enough.
I always got to have 3 ways.
Oh, for 100.
No, he told us to do 3 ways. So this is 100. That's my teacher way.
No, when you start doubling this, I'm saying you got
Oh.
You're wasting time. You keep doing
Now you're saying there's a more efficient way to do it?
I'm not telling her she's wasting her time.
Act like a kid.
All right, so I think most of us have done our first way. So I have a new challenge, or a first couple ways probably. So I have a challenge for you. I mean, my favorite way to do this is to do a lesson with you. But today we're demonstrating what I think this week will be like that we do together. And so we actually have a case study for you that I provided a transcript for. It's just 2 pages. But I'm going to have you read it. And it is the story of Mr. Donnelly doing this task in his classroom. But you have an additional task on top of this. So before you start reading, you got this. we have 8 effective teaching practices, which I've referenced a few times already in this session, but I haven't effectively introduced. So here they are. There are 8 of them. I'm not going to tell you about them right now, but what I want you to do is carefully read this case study and find out where are some of the places where Mr. Donnelly utilizes these effective teaching practices. My goal in this piece of the presentation is both for you to understand how Mr. Donnelly manages this task so you can see what it looks like in a real classroom that is engaged in this, but importantly, so that we can explore what these effective teaching practices are. So this is really what my interest is that we use this case study to gain a better sense of what these effective teaching practices are. So with that in mind, all you got to do is, let's say you're reading lines 3, 4, and 5 on the document, and you see that Mr. Donnelly knows that he wants to focus on 3 key strategies for solving proportional problems like that. You would say next to that, it's clear that Mr. Donnelly knows his mathematical goals, and you put a 1 next to it. That's so important because later on when we're exploring these, you'll want to know what lines they show up on. So you want to mark down these 8 numbers on your paper so we can find them later. Is everybody kind of clear about what that will look like or could look like on your paper? Okay, I'm going to give you approximately 8 minutes to do this work. So if you're a slow reader, you might speed read through it once first. Yeah, exactly. Tough, I'm pushing you here.